Good morning. First up, apologies if my energy level or if I sound completely incoherent or if my energy level is low, because I was up pretty much the whole night catching up with friends and family who were affected in the tragedy in Manchester. It's actually it's pretty disgusting what's happened there. Our thoughts and our prayers are to all those who are affected. Anyway, I thought I'd start with, the organizers asked me to talk about shaping the digital future of a telco. This is the third time now that I've been up here on the stage presenting what we've done in Axiata Digital. This is probably the first time that I'm going to try to loop it back to the telco, because I generally don't like to talk about the telco. I thought I left the industry about 3 years ago, but it keeps coming back. I want to start with this, which is the collection of macro trends that are really exciting for the telco industry. Patrick, in his introduction, alluded to some of these, right? Smartphone penetrations in across the Southeast Asian market. So and I'll give you an example within the Axiata Group. For those of you who are unfamiliar, the Axiata Group is a telco group that has 9 properties across Southeast Asia, South Asia. We operate under the brand Celcom in Malaysia, M1 in Singapore, XL in Indonesia, amongst others. And as you can see from these two charts, we've actually experienced tremendous growth as well. Our subscriber base, as at year ends of those years, have grown significantly, right? 5 years ago, roughly when I first joined the company, we were at 215 million subscribers. We are now at 320 million across the group. These are subscribers that we know we interact with on a day-to-day basis. And then in terms of the volumes of data that we transmit, and I want to pick on volume because this is effectively the unit of the product that we sell. We're effectively selling those data that you consume very heavily each day. That's in petabytes, and for those of you who don't know what a petabyte is, it's a million gigabyte. And that's grown from 260 petabytes in 2014 to 950 in 2016. That's about 3.7x in 2 years. So again, you would imagine that kind of our company is growing phenomenally. To give you a context of what 950 petabytes would mean in terms of volume of data, if it is one long continuous stream of a YouTube SD video, it would take if my math is correct, 120,000 years for that video to finish playing, right? So that is a lot of data. Last time I checked, I don't think humanity has been around for 120,000 years, so this video will play for a long time. So with all that kind of background, you would think that telcos are enjoying a very lucrative period. Now, unfortunately, if you had, and I know some of you did, if you had invested in telcos in the region, and this is the sum aggregate market cap of the ASEAN telcos in the big 5 markets, so Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, Singapore, Philippines. If you had invested in kind of the index fund, if you like, of such an ASEAN telco, it generally would have given you an annual growth of about 3.4% in the last 5 years. Not very exciting at all, especially when you compare it to investing it in 3G, and I want to qualify that this is not the 3G spectrum in a telco. This is what Patrick alluded to in his introduction yesterday, Garena, Gojek, and Grab, right? So I only have 2 of the Gs here, but if you had invested in them in their most recent round, if you had invested in them in the penultimate round, and then you compare the valuation growth against the most recent round, that's 2x growth for one of them, 3x goes for the other. Our friends from Garena has not publicly disclosed the valuation of the latest round. I know that you guys all know that they just raised 550 million last week. It has yet to be publicly disclosed how much the post-money valuation is. So I don't have the third G here, but between Gojek and Grab, if you had put money in their 2015 round versus their 2016 round, you'd kind of have a very nice, healthy return. And oh, by the way, in case you don't know, Grab in itself is now larger than some of the telcos by market cap in the region. So it is actually becoming quite an interesting play. So what's the problem with telcos, right? I mean, we saw all the fundamentals. It's been really exciting, but we're seeing none of that money come through. And the large problem is the fact that we actually haven't been able to monetize around all that growth. So what telcos around the world have done is this, right? It's an incredibly busy slide. You will see telcos participating in the digital arena across this very wide spectrum. Let me go all the way to number one, which is that telcos who still think that connectivity is their single core business and they're not going to do anything else, right? Industry experts have called this the dumb pipe strategy, because effectively what you're doing is you're building a pipe and it's completely dumb. All the smarts come above that with the likes of some of the stuff that Patrick and his team are building. And then on the opposite extreme of that, you have companies like Verizon, where in many public appearances, Lowell McAdam, the chief executive of Verizon, they basically no longer call themselves a telco, right? They are effectively a multi-core company. Media, one component of that. Digital is a very, very big component of that. And then you have people kind of, sort of in between. What I want to point out too is the real distinction is actually in the bottom, right, where as you move further and further to the right, digital then becomes a much larger component of the overall enterprise value. So going back to the point that I showed before, where telcos have not yet been able to monetize and capture market cap or market valuation around digital, this is starting to kind of address that a little bit. Now, where is Axiata playing? I would say that 3 years ago when I joined this unit, we were probably around number 2. We were experimenting with digital as a value add to our connectivity business. I think over time, though, we've kind of gotten some good track records, some momentum. Our board, our shareholders are starting to see some value coming out of it, and so we're starting to move further and further and further to the right. And I'll come back to this again at the end to kind of show you where we've sort of landed. So what have we done? For those of you who were in my previous talks, we're essentially building a number of businesses or investing in a number of businesses that either A, help us participate in digital or OTT adjacencies to help us enhance core business revenue, right? Because our core business is still a fairly large chunk of our overall enterprise value. So anything that you can do to raise ARPUs, to reduce churn, to increase opportunities to capture new customers, that's a lot the focus that what Axiata Digital is doing for the Axiata Group. The other thing that we're also doing is recognizing that we as a telco group, we're sitting on tons of assets, right? And I think many of you have heard these before, right? We saw it in the page previously. We are connected to 320 million customers. Surely that must mean something, right? And I'll show you some showcases later on how we've been able to kind of leverage the connection to the customers, the insights that we actually have about our customers, access to the 1.8 million retail touch points that we have across our footprint to enable digital businesses. And so we recognize that we have effectively oil sitting underneath our operations, and we've got to unlock that oil. Otherwise, it's just going to be money left on the table. And that's a little bit what we've also started to do. This is our portfolio today. So in the last 3 or so years, we've built up a portfolio of about 32 subsidiary companies, 13 investees to our fund, which I'll describe in a second. But they're principally anchored around digital advertising, where we can leverage the insights and the data that we have about our customers to support advertisers. The second one being digital marketplaces and other e-commerce models, really kind of banking behind some of the things that Dato' Yasmin just talked about. Digital financial services are something that's actually relatively core to what we do. As an organization, we process something like 600 transactions every. Let me get this right. Sorry, let me say that again. It's 120 transactions every second, right? So every second, as we talk, a telco in our network is doing a processing of a transaction, meaning to say that they're taking cash from someone and they're providing that cash into some kind of wallet, some kind of top-up, right? And that's something that we know how to do very well, which is why we sort of branched into payment businesses, mobile financial services. And then digital entertainment, digital health, Internet of Things, disruptor models. Those are some of the experimentations that we're doing right now. The disruptor model, I think the mandate that we got from our board, which is really, really cool, was to go build a model that will destroy Axiata. I don't think, you guys have jobs where your board tells you go build something, go destroy your company. We actually had the luxury to do that. One of the models that we built was a company called Twig, an ad-funded model, which I'll come back to in a second. And then the enablers that you have in the bottom, AIU is our intelligence unit. It's basically where we actually collect a lot of the information that we have about our customers. And then 5 ways to monetize that. MIFE is our API gateway, which is growing something like 30-40% month on month. It's phenomenal. ADIF is our investment fund. Some of the GPs from ADIF are actually in here today. So you can talk to them about funding, right? So that's the portfolio that we have today. I think since Wild Digital last year, we had added 6 new companies to the group. 20 of these, by the way, are actually internal incubation. So we're not just an investor, we're actually a venture builder as well. So we built some of these companies internally, and some of them we build it externally. So you can see that 6 are external incubations where we actually find a partner, we JV with them because they have certain skill sets, certain capabilities, and then we build a business together. We have 6 minority investments. Essentially, our minority investments are for businesses that we think we love their model. We want to bring that model into Southeast Asia, into our footprint markets, and so we take a little bit of a, if you like, a call option on them by investing in them. And then, as I said before, ADIF is our Axiata Digital Innovation Fund. We have 13 early stage investments within that. And for those of you who may have heard Aliza speak about Unlock, we got so excited by the model, we made some phone calls, the lawyers get together, the bankers got together, and as of last night, Unlock became the newest family member of the Axiata Group. So welcome, Aliza. Happy to have you on board. I don't want to say too much because then maybe Patrick will take credit for this deal happening here at Wild Digital. So we've changed now, 7 new units since 2016, 7 minority investments. So this is what we've done so far. I want to just very quickly do 3 showcase. Bima, a company that you guys saw yesterday. Why did we invest in them? Well, premise number 1 was the fact that mobile bundles with a microinsurance premium against it actually helps retention of the customer, right? So if you have on your mobile, and again, we're talking about people who are at the bottom of the pyramid, people who don't have access to insurance premiums. If you have an insurance premium attached to your mobile subscription, then you're not going to churn because you're going to have to give up all that premium that you've built up over time. So churn drastically reduces when you have something like that. So we thought this was a cool model. We built it with them. We had a partnership with them where they used our distribution to really enable their rapid scale up, right? So literally within a few months, in our first market in Bangladesh, we had something like 2 million subscribers just on microinsurance. And one of the things that we also noticed is because largely their EV is driven by the number of customers that they have. And if the customers are all Axiata customers that are coming on board anyway, we might as well have a call option on the value that they're growing. So we invested in Bima. AIU, this is our intelligence unit, and when I say this, I don't want you guys to go get freaked out and start turning off your phone. Annually, and this is what my data scientists all tell me, annually 47 million lines of information per customer goes through our network. So just to give you a sense, like if sex is male is 1 line, age, that's another line. On an annual basis, for every single one of our customer, we have about 47 million lines of information. That's a shitload of information. That's a very scary thought. Do we store all of them? Well, we don't, right? Because it's virtually impossible. We'll have to have massive server farms to be able to capture that kind of information. But what that means, though, is we have amazing and very deep customer insights to actually help upsell our telco products, which is what we've largely done for the longest time. We know that you like this, so therefore you might buy this. So we've kind of upsold our telco products. But we've also cross-sold a lot of the digital products because now that we have 30 companies in our portfolio, well, you know what? We know kind of what you're looking for, so maybe we'll direct you to 11th Street where they're actually selling that product, right? So that's something that we've also done. And then, of course, the last thing that we've done is basically support advertisers like the Unilevers, the Coca-Colas, and whatnot of the world to actually help them find their audience pools that they want to target. And we're doing all this, via AI bots now. Our team at AIU used to stand for Axiata Intelligence Unit. They've now rebranded themselves to Artificial Intelligence Unit because they're building a lot of bots to try to capture a lot of that activity. And then the last thing that I want to show is MIFE. For those of you who were here last year, MIFE actually did a whole a presentation around what they could do and what they could offer, and we actually got a lot of customers from MIFE in there. But essentially, when you think about it, digital companies kind of want access to our customers, all 320 of them, 320 million of them. They want access to our billing relationships, so we've essentially created an API gateway that allows all these digital companies to connect in a fairly seamless way. And the other thing that's also great about this is that it then gives us first dibs on great models that can actually create a lot of value upside just by plugging in and accessing a lot of the telco assets, right? So if suddenly this company like Bima plugged in suddenly gets valuation uplift because they've connected to 5-10 million customers from our side, we want to be able to invest in them, right? So the model was sort of designed in such a way that helps us capture value. So that's kind of a little bit sort of who we are. Just a quick recap on traction of the last 5 years. So we've grown quite a fair bit in the last 5 years. Sorry, in the last 3 years. My bad, 3 years. 11. I've only been in the job for 2.5. So 11.5x revenue growth. Our net revenue, which is something that we measure quite closely between the last quarter one of 2016 to quarter one of 2017, that's doubled. Our customer base, this is what's really exciting for us, right? So we have about 32 million monthly actives or monthly transacting customers. So somewhere in the system, there are about at any given month, there are about 32 million customers that are transacting on our portfolio. We have 59 million registered users registered across our portfolio. And then the last one is really interesting, right? Because we've built these API gateways. And by the way, there are 2 hubs right now, one here in Southeast Asia and the other one here in India. And when you add all the connections that we have on a hub, it's roughly about 1.1 billion customers that are actually connected to our hubs right now. So we are going to find ways to kind of connect you guys to those 1.1 billion customers if you're interested. Our employee base, we've grown quite a fair bit. We're now at about 1,200. One thing that we track a lot is the number of people who came from a telco background. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a short while because there are certain things that people with telco backgrounds can bring, but there are also a lot of baggage that they can carry with them, and sometimes that's not too good. So the fact that we have 84% of our guys who've never ever worked in a telco before, who've come from Google, from Facebook, etc., that's pretty exciting for us. And then the last one, and please don't sort of take pictures of this if you don't mind. In terms of valuation, relative to the original investment that we kind of put in, that's about a 4.8x return. So going back to our original conversation around trying to capture EV for the telco, we're doing our little part to do that, right? Is this a successful model? Don't know. Time will tell. We're hoping that it does work very well, but we will see, and hopefully in the coming years I can tell you more about it. I'll end with a final slide. And this is essentially tips for any kind of incumbents, right? There are a lot of large traditional organizations that are out there that are trying to build a digital future. This is some of the lessons that we've learned. Number one, change your governance model, right? We are a public listed company. We have boards upon boards upon boards to try to get approvals for doing certain things. When I came in 2.5 years ago, first thing that we did was we changed our governance around investments. We simplified it considerably. We actually have a board investment committee that sits outside of the main board that can get together whenever we want to, and that's actually helped us do a lot of deals a lot quicker. Something that I want to say very carefully, if need be, change your shareholders. I think a lot of incumbent organizations have shareholders who are expecting stable returns. In our case, actually, we're quite lucky, right? Because our parent shareholder is Khazanah. Some of you may know Khazanah is invested in Alibaba. They have money in Garena, one of the 3Gs, amongst other things. So we've been quite fortunate because they're actually quite understanding of the businesses that we're entering into. They understand the thesis that we're building up. Next is the operating model. I mean, literally everything, right? If you're an incumbent, you're going to stuck with procurement policies, finance procedures, right? Recruiting, I mean, one of the things that I did when I first came in was I got rid of this thing called a job description profile, right? I was meant to fill up a 5-page job description every time I want to hire someone. That was rubbish, right? Because literally when you bring it into a startup environment, what you're doing today is going to be very, very different from what you're doing in 3 months' time. We got to get rid of that, and so we had to change a lot of the asset components of our operating model. And then last but not least, build a very different DNA. For us, when we started, we inherited a lot of the telco mindset, and I'll pick a few of them. One of them is being incrementalist. When you go to a telco executive, when they tell you, oh, I'm going to grow 20, 30% year on year, that's great in a telco, right? When teams come to me and say they want to grow 20 and 30%, I go, dude, you're a 2-year-old company. You should be growing 3x, 5x, not 20, 30% year on year. Telco people are generally very risk averse because they're trying to protect that cash flow engine that has worked very well. Actually largely arrogant, right? A lot of chest thumping. People will come in and say, we want to work with you. And I tell the story in many situations where, this was about 5 years ago when I was still in the telco side, where a small Swedish music streaming company came and saw us. I thought it was a great model. I brought them to one of our chief marketing officers from one of the larger operating companies. 2 questions that they had. One is, what is music streaming? Now, understandably, 5 years ago, people didn't understand what music streaming was, right? Because iTunes had that paid model. So that's fine. But the other question was more like well, why should we work with a small Swedish unknown company when we typically work with the large American SIs and integrators and whatnot? And that just reflects the kind of arrogance that you will sometimes face when you're dealing with large incumbent organizations. So one of the things that we did from day one is we broke that, right? Because we wanted to work with hungry entrepreneurial companies that really want to make a change here. So we took away that, and then of course urgency, right? And I hate it when someone sends me an email and says, we need to set up a meeting. We need to call a steering committee to approve our 12-month roadmap. I go, dude, what are you talking about? Let's just go do, right? You don't need an approval. You don't need an alignment. You don't need to fix on your roadmaps. Just go fucking do it, right? And so people are starting to understand that actually we have to build a very different DNA in order for this to succeed. The next speaker is actually, and I think you're going to have a lot of fun here. He's actually the Chief Strategy Officer at Axiata Digital, Zoran. Again, actually, you did work in a telco, but that was about 15 years ago, right? So you're excusable. And he's going to be moderated, I believe, by David from iFlix. And I already know that they're going to have a good stab and poking fun at Axiata Digital. So if you have any questions, you can direct that to them. I'm also happy to take any questions that you might have. Thank you very much.